So today's topic is, if I was starting over today in my data career, what would I do? Um, that sounds super interesting. So you're not only doing your startup, like how does people start over, but you're also talking about it from the point of view of you've already got the experience. Now you're gonna go back and redo some things, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking about for myself, if I were going to start today, I knew I was interested in a data career. How would I approach that? What things would I do? And so that's the topic, and we're going to go ahead and dive right in. There is a lot here, so yeah, we're going to get right into it.
Awesome.
First thing is I would learn ANSI SQL and T SQL, and the reason I would do both,
Both.
yes, both. Here's why both. Because you're very likely to run into SQL Server pretty quickly when you start your data career. Lots of other platforms out there as well, but SQL Server is very prominent. So when you do that, I feel like you need to learn how to leverage SQL Server to the best of its capabilities. And in order to do that, you have to learn Microsoft's proprietary version of SQL called T-SQL or Transact SQL. Um, Without that, you're kind of limited to what I call the least common denominator, which is just the ANSI SQL that will work everywhere. It's not that that's inferior, it's just that it does limit you on a platform like SQL Server because you just won't be able to do as much if you just don't use any of the proprietary things that are inside Microsoft SQL Server. This first one is a pretty big undertaking by itself. And when I say learn ANSI SQL and T-SQL, it's going to take you a while to feel competent. And by a while, I mean, a year or two. I don't mean to discourage anyone, but it's you're learning a quasi programming language. I realize that to the wider IT community, SQL Server isn't a true programming language, but it's very similar.
None of
And
that propaganda on this show. No, no. It's the program language. It's Turing complete. It just may be declarative instead of empirical, and it may not lean itself to certain tricks that other programming languages have. But no, it's a language. You program in it, you get your work done. It's powerful. It just specializes in data, not blinking lights on the screen when you play, video games, right? So
yeah,
as you
yeah,
were.
exactly. Yeah, and I don't mean to indicate that SQL is hard to learn. It's not hard to learn and get started, but to get to an intermediate or advanced level, it's going to take you a while. There's a lot to do to get to that level. And so you do need to get into learning T-SQL. I think SQL, the ANSI SQL will work anywhere in a number of relational database systems. And so you want to learn that ANSI SQL, and that will work for you on MySQL, on PostgreSQL, and other platforms. And then you want to learn Transact SQL for SQL Server, which you are inevitably going to run into. Then the next thing that I would do if I were starting a data career right now is learn a DevOps language like PowerShell. And I'm calling it a DevOps language for lack of maybe a better or different way to refer to it. But what I'm really talking about is something that will give you the ability to do automation. Automation is extremely important, even in data. And so being able to build a repeatable process that will let you do the same thing with less energy, less time put into it, and in a consistent way is very important in a data career. PowerShell is everywhere. It is Microsoft's platform or language for automation. It is cross-platform. And so for me, that's where I would start. So it looks like we do have Anthony back.
Gotta
I
be-
would, yeah. Again, I would learn PowerShell. Another option is Python. I know Python is very popular for what I'm calling a DevOps language or some sort of automation language. I just don't have experience with that, but I do know that Python is very popular, and you can do automation with that as well, and including interactions with SQL Server, and I'm sure other relational systems as well. But some sort of automation language, I think, is definitely another place that I would stop off along the way of building myself a data career in the here and now. The third thing that I would go ahead and do if I were going to start in a data career again is I would learn relational database engine internals. Now it's kind of a mouthful and it's kind of geeky, but both of those things fit me if you knew me on a personal level, and B, I think it's important because doing this would help me um, eliminate some common mistakes that I see people make when they write code for SQL Server, particularly. If you don't understand how the relational database engine works that you're writing for, you're very likely to do things that work against the system that you are working on. I'm going to give just a very common basic example. There are many more I could give, but the first thing that comes to mind is the use of cursors. Cursors, I think, come from the programming side where programmers are used to telling the program not only what needs to be done, but how to do the thing that you're trying to do. And that's fine. That's how those systems are built. However, SQL Server doesn't work like that. SQL is a declarative language. You tell SQL what you want to do, and the SQL Server engine indicates how to do it. It figures out how to do the thing that you asked for. So you don't need to go through the process of trying to specify row by row processing for data sets for SQL Server. And in fact, that's the slow way to do things for a platform like SQL Server. Another place where I kind of see this a lot is things like related to design. So for instance, if you have to create a table or something, people do things that are against a relational database engine. They'll make a table that is, 50 columns wide. 25 of them are in varchar max. There's no primary key. And then they wonder why their queries are slow. Well, it's because you're doing stuff that is contrary to the platform you're on. And so this is why it's in my list. I would put energy into learning how the engine that I am working on actually functions so that I can write code for that engine so that it works well.
Right. And if anyone's listening and they hear those bullet points that you listed off and don't know why that's important, that doubles down on the point you're trying to make. The more you know about the internals, the way things work, and why things should be a certain way, the more you realize the relevance, right? You can't have hash tables. You got to have keys on there. That way, you can quickly find the data you're looking for. You don't want varchar max because yes, SQL Server can store lots of data in a column, but it gets stored off page. And if you don't know what that means, exactly, that's internals, right? So instead of it being the information is there on the page that you have in RAM, you've got to go get a different page somewhere else. And the wide tables. That means the more data you got to load per row when you could just be doing a lookup against a lookup table.
Yeah, exactly. A small lookup table.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so that's what I would I would do. I'm going to learn ANSI SQL and T-SQL, learn a DevOps, what I'm calling a DevOps language like PowerShell or Python, and then I'm going to learn how the relational database engine that I'm working with actually works, whether that's SQL Server, it's MySQL, PostgreSQL. I think it's important to understand that underlying layer so that you don't do things that are contrary to the platform you're on. So we're halfway through this list. Number 4 is I would experiment with and learn SQL Server and at least one other relational engine. Many job descriptions are multi-platform these days. And so it's very likely that you're going to end up in a company where there's not just MySQL, but there's also Oracle or SQL Server or all three of those things. They might even have PostgreSQL or other things that are NoSQL, like MongoDB or all kinds of platforms out there. Learn more than just one platform. That's what I would do if I were going at it again. I would pull out a SQL Server book and I would probably pull out either MySQL or PostgreSQL, and I would read those books together so that I could get a feel for how each one of them works and broaden my own set of skills as I'm learning how to be a data professional.
That's interesting. Oh, hello, HN. Um, yeah, so that's interesting. So, um, do you think there'd be a struggle there trying to learn two entirely different systems, or do you mean learn one system and just try the same thing in the other? Like, do you mean put 100% into both?
Um, I mean, you could do it either way. I tend to be all or nothing, so I would probably try to learn them both at the same time. I'm not necessarily saying that's the best option, but you could. If you're a person that needs to learn one thing, you learn this and then you learn this thing, that's fine too. I'm just saying I wouldn't tie myself to one platform if I were starting over.
Yeah, we're talking about the first year, right? So you're saying if you're learning on your own, you would, or even if you're working somewhere already, you would also spend some time. It's negotiable how much time. Spend some time learning the other thing. That way, when you are looking for a job or your next job, those resumes that list off a bunch of things, you can at least talk to something. Yeah, I
Yeah.
specialize in X, but I have done some work in this. I can make some intelligent comments about the differences between the two, other than what Google tells you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It will give you that ability to apply for jobs that you don't have the ability to if you just specialize in one platform. And so I think that's why it's really, really important to do that. That was number 4 of if I was starting over today in my data career, what would I do? The 5th thing is I would learn a cloud platform. So there are lots of cloud platforms. We have GCP, Google Cloud Platforms, what it's called. There is, of course, AWS. There's Azure. There are other smaller players like Rackspace and IBM, and I think at HP, Oracle. So there are all kinds of places that are offering cloud. I would pick whatever cloud platform your company is currently using, and I would learn that. If your company is multi-cloud already, then maybe ask your company, which one do you want me to learn first? And dive into that one. I'm not saying you need to try to become an expert or focus on that exclusively, but I think learning some cloud fundamentals is going to be important for you going forward. Many companies are either on cloud now or they're looking into cloud. They're investigating the possibility of moving to cloud. And so having some sort of cloud skills is going to be really important when you're starting a data career right now. So the last thing I would do if I were going to start a data career now is I would work on building a portfolio of real world problems that I've solved with the things I'm learning right now. And this is going to show your current employer and prospective employers not only what you're learning, but that you are capable of doing the investigative work necessary to solve real world problems that they care about. And so you can use something like GitHub to post coding that you've done and describe problems that you've solved, create projects there that people can look at and ask you questions about in an interview and that sort of thing. And so I think building some sort of portfolio of real world problems, real world experience is going to be crucial for you as a person trying to start a data career. So again, for the 6 things that I would do if I was starting over, I would learn ANSI SQL and T-SQL. Learn them both because you're likely to run into SQL Server, and you want to be able to extend and use it to its fullest. I mean, these platforms are expensive, and so when you hit a platform that has proprietary language to it, to me it makes sense to use it to its fullest. The company has spent a lot of money on that platform. Use it to its fullest. The second thing I would do is learn some sort of what I'm calling a DevOps or automation language. In my case, I would start with PowerShell, but Python is also an excellent choice for that. The next thing I would do is learn relational database engine internals. And that's going to help you not make mistakes, coding mistakes on the platform that you're using. If you understand how your platform that you are working on works internally, you're less likely to create code that works against that platform. Fourth, I would experiment with and learn SQL Server and at least one other relational engine. And I could even say one other engine. It doesn't necessarily have to be relational. So you could do MongoDB or something in the NoSQL world. But my point here is don't get stuck into one platform. I would make sure I was multi-platform if I were starting over today, because companies usually are multi-platform. So I think it's important that you, as a person who's looking to start a data career, be multi-platform. The fifth thing that I would do if I were starting over today is I would focus on learning a cloud platform. A lot of companies not only are multi-platform in terms of their databases, but multi-platform in terms of their providers. So they might be on-prem, but they might also be on their way to AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform, or on-prem and on their way to more than one platform at a time. So I think learning cloud fundamentals is going to be important at the start of your data career, so you get a sense of how does cloud work? What things do I need to think about in cloud that maybe I don't always have to give consideration to when I'm on-prem? And then the last or sixth thing that I would do is work on building a portfolio of some kind that shows that I know how to solve real world problems with the things that I'm learning. One thing that I will give you, or a couple of things that I will give you in terms of thinking about next week is I am going to talk about how I would accomplish this plan. So I've given you 6 things that I would do if I were starting over. And I'm going to give you a couple of things here that I think you could look at or start to look at in terms of, that's great, but how would I accomplish this? What resources would I use? And so here up on the screen is a link to my GitHub where I have a training resources doc that you can grab that will provide a bunch of resources about learning SQL Server, whether that's paid or free resources. And then a similar thing, if you don't want to go out to the GitHub, you can just go out to my website and take a look at this blog post that I did about 2 years ago now, where I'm talking about how do you find good SQL Server training resources. Yes, you can go out and Google things or Bing or whatever your search engine is, but how do you know you found something that's good? How do you know that what is on your screen that you searched, how do you know that it's worthy of something? And so next week we're going to talk about how would I accomplish or implement the 6-part plan that I talked about tonight. And I've given you a couple of places to go to think about prepping yourself for answering that question. And it looks like we do have Anthony back.
I only had to restart my home internet and the computer and the matrix. Yeah. Hello again, everybody. Yes, thank you, chat. Okay, so yeah, I'm glad to be back. Sorry I missed so much. Hopefully the problem's been cleared up.
Yeah, I hope so as well. Craftsman is saying, I feel like you're talking directly to me. So hopefully that's a good thing and you getting some value out of that.
Yeah, the SQL Server internals, it ends up being valuable even if you're not fully SQL, even if you just program any of the languages. Almost every project touches a database, right? Appreciate you watching ReadySetData. Feel free to reach out to us on Discord, LinkedIn, Twitter, and you can find us on Twitch whenever we stream live. You'll get all the hot mess that is the technical details as far as making the show and my internet getting cut out constantly. But that's it for this first topic, and I appreciate everyone's time. Good night, everybody.